A wedding was made for something no one ever expected. You're watching a close family, and this is how it began.
My name's Cynthia. I'm 32 years old. And yes, my parents really did skip my wedding to attend my brother's dog's obedience school graduation. They didn't call. They didn't text. They didn't even send a card. But while I walked myself down the aisle, they live-streamed Bruno, the family's pride and joy, trotting across a stage in a miniature cap and gown. The next morning, a box arrived on my porch. Paw-print wrapping paper. Inside, a squeaky toy, a rubber bone wrapped in gold foil, and a note that read, "Hope your marriage is as obedient as Bruno. Love, Bruno." People think this is just about a missed wedding. It's not. It's about being erased by the people who raised you, paying for your own abandonment, and then watching them celebrate someone else in your place. I used to think family was about showing up, but on the morning of my wedding, I sent them something back. Something they never saw coming. And what happened next still makes my hands shake when I tell it. If you've ever been replaced, erased, or quietly cut out of your own story, stick with me. You're going to understand exactly why I chose the ending I did. The morning of my wedding smelled like lavender and damp grass, leftovers from the storm the night before. Silas had gone for a walk with his dad. I stayed behind, sitting in front of the mirror in my robe, hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm coffee. At 9:43 a.m., my phone buzzed. The message was from my mom. "Sweetie, we're so sorry. Bruno has his graduation today. He's been working so hard. We'll make it up to you soon. Love, Mom and Dad." I blinked once, twice. Graduation for the dog. I whispered it out loud to no one, just to hear how insane it sounded. They chose the dog. I didn't cry. Crying would have meant I believed there was still something to fight for. I just set the phone face down and went back to folding napkins, like the day hadn't already been split in two. By the time guests started arriving, the chairs at the front, labeled "Parents of the Bride," sat untouched. My best friend offered to walk me down the aisle, but I refused. I wanted to own that walk, even if the space beside me felt like a canyon. Sunlight hit the back of my dress as I stepped forward alone. Every step felt louder than it should have. Those two chairs stared back at me like witnesses. No one dared to sit there. No one dared to say the obvious out loud. And then, somewhere behind me, a cousin whispered, "Maybe Bruno's valedictorian." Not cruel, just clueless. Somehow, that made it worse. I smiled for the photos. I cut the cake. I accepted hugs from people who didn't know what to say. But inside, something had already calcified. Like the part of me still waiting for my parents' approval had turned to stone. But the worst wasn't their absence. It was what showed up in their place. The reception was warm in all the ways that should have mattered. String lights swaying in the breeze, glasses clinking, laughter weaving through the music. But I moved through it like a guest at someone else's celebration. I smiled when the camera found me. I nodded at small talk. My body was there. The rest of me wasn't. And then, proof. Halfway through dinner, my old college roommate Daria leaned across the table, her phone glowing in her hand. She hesitated, then tilted the screen toward me. The title read, "Bruno's Big Day, Obedience School Grad." The video played, a small stage draped with a banner, "Congrats to our graduates." In the center, Bruno sat in a tuxedo harness, tail wagging. My parents were front row, clapping like it was a Broadway premiere. At one point, my father leaned toward the camera and said, "He's our pride and joy." The whole table went silent. I didn't blink, didn't flinch. I just whispered to Daria and Silas. They didn't miss my wedding. They hosted another one for someone with a tail. I thought that was the bottom. It wasn't. Because the truth didn't just sit on that stage wagging its tail. It was sitting in my bank records, waiting for me to notice. And when I finally saw it, the whole story tilted. The morning after the wedding, I was still in that strange in-between, too numb to cry, too awake to forget. Silas was downstairs making coffee. I stayed in bed, scrolling through the flood of photos guests had tagged me in. And then, without really knowing why, I opened my banking app. There it was. Pine Ridge Obedience School. $750. Dated exactly 9 months earlier. My name, my card, my money. I stared at the number until my jaw locked. Pine Ridge. The same school. The same program. The same stage Bruno had strutted across while my parents clapped. I hadn't just been replaced. I had funded my own replacement. 9 months ago, when Bruno bit the UPS guy and my brother panicked in the family group chat, I'd offered, out of some misguided hope, to pay the deposit for the best training program in the state. My mother had called me thoughtful. My brother had called me a lifesaver. Now I knew exactly what I'd saved. I dug through the desk in the guest room and found it. An unused thank you card, white linen stock, gold trim. Inside, in my father's handwriting, "Thanks for supporting Colton and Bruno. Couldn't have done it without you." No signature, no warmth, just a receipt in disguise. It wasn't that they forgot my wedding, it's that they remembered something else more. I printed the bank statement, taped it into the first page of a black-covered journal, and wrote beneath it, "The cost of love, measured in obedience." Then I slid the journal into the drawer beside my wedding album. One held the proof of what I'd built, the other held the proof of who tore it down. But the real break didn't come from a receipt. It came from the words my mother chose next. I told myself not to call, not to give them another opening to dress cruelty up as misunderstanding. But the part of me still wired to believe family might one day act like family dialed anyway. My father answered. His voice was as flat as old linoleum. "Hello? It's me," I said. "Is Mom there?" "She's busy. What do you need?" I just wanted to ask. "Why didn't you come?" He didn't hesitate. "We told you, Bruno had his graduation. You didn't think your daughter's wedding was more important than a dog learning to sit?" I heard muffled movement, then my mother's voice, crisp and polished like she was reading from a script. "Cynthia, sweetie, you know dogs are loyal. They don't abandon family over drama." I let that sentence sit, heavy and sharp, before answering. "You weren't defending your choice. You were insulting mine." And I hung up. No screaming, no pleading. Just a clean sever, but the sever wasn't enough. A week later, a letter arrived. No handwriting, just a typed note, folded with military precision. "Cynthia, marriage when rushed is often a performance. We chose not to encourage spectacle. Hope you understand. No love, no names." I taped it into my journal opposite the obedience school receipt. Underneath I wrote, "My wedding was a performance, but I was the only one who showed up with a script." That was the last page where I wrote like I was keeping evidence. The next page was for action. I called my brother. "You know what's funny?" I said, my voice steady. "That program you're all so proud of. The tuxedo, the stage, the pride and joy. I paid for it. I funded my own abandonment." Silence. Not regret, just surprise. "Why do you always keep score?" he muttered. "Because someone has to," I said. "You all certainly don't." Click, end of call. And just when I thought the conversation was over, the world found out what they'd done. I didn't plan on posting anything. But one morning, I opened my wedding photos and stopped at the one I'd been avoiding. The shot of me walking down the aisle alone. 2 chairs in the background sat empty. The name cards, parents of the bride, still perfectly legible. I cropped nothing. I added no filter. Caption: "Respect was RSVP'd but never showed." By noon, my inbox was flooding. Comments poured in. Shock, outrage, quiet Me Too messages from strangers who'd been erased by their own families. By nightfall, the photo had been reshared over 1,000 times. Then came the morning show request. Under the bright studio lights, the host asked, "What made you post that photo?" I looked straight into the lens. Because silence was never mutual. It was imposed, and I'm not carrying it anymore. Gasps rippled through the audience when I read my mother's wedding day text out loud. They didn't miss my wedding, I told them. They chose something else. After the interview, a woman outside the studio stopped me. "That wasn't just your story," she said, voice breaking. "It was mine too." I didn't cry. I didn't need to. Weeks later, I stood in front of the gallery wall in my living room. On it hung 3 frames. Our wedding photo under the arch, Silas's hand in mine, a candid of friends and neighbors laughing in our backyard, and an empty frame labeled to be filled by who shows up. I don't wait for their calls anymore. I don't watch their lives from the sidelines. They made a legacy out of a dog. I made peace mine. If someone shows you they'll leave your chair empty, don't beg them to fill it. Build a table where they never had a seat. If you've ever had to start your own wall, your own circle, or your own table, share your story below. Someone else might need to see that it's possible.